I think it's very important for every educator, whether you are here or there, is to connect with your student and see how they feel. There may be artificial intelligence, robotics, and a whole lot of software engineers, but who is making those software engineers? Every garden, every theater, everywhere we will need inclusion.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Great Principles. I am Seema Choria. I bring to you another iconic figure from the world of Indian academia. A truly inclusive education means that students are presumed competent to communicate about and learn general education curriculum content. All learners deserve to meet their potential, from preschool to high school and beyond. Inclusive education means all children in the same classrooms, in the same schools. It means real learning opportunities for groups who have traditionally been excluded. Not only children with disabilities, but speakers of minority languages too. Our guest today is an awe-inspiring, legendary figure from the world of Indian academia. I feel deeply honored to have her speak about education and everything that affects us. She is an expert in overreaching paradigms of education learning, and I believe we as parents, educators, and careerists shall have very informed opinion about learning, learners, and educators. I present to you Ms. Masrat Tawawala, co-founder and director, Sundarji's Global Academia India, and CEO, Suyog Sundarji Group of Institute, India. We are extremely honored to have you here, ma'am. Welcome to Great Principles.
Thank you so much for having me over here. It's been a pleasure and also a very proud moment to speak on this platform, which is going to reach the masses. So I hope that we can bring around the advocacy that we want to do it, inclusive society, inclusive schools, inclusive gardens, inclusive theaters, inclusive real life situations. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Wonderful, ma'am. So let us begin first from knowing about you. You know, once upon a time, you started 25 years ago. Inspired by enlightened minds, you grew up with and motivated by educators. So I would like to know from you, how did young Masrat envision her journey as an educator?
So to tell you frankly, my dear, there was never a journey when you are young. It's just a passing thought, or it could be a dream. Now, how that dream materializes, I think life incidents, challenges, opportunities all unfold. I'll just briefly tell you about my education. A very simple, humble family, middle class we come from. We used to stay in Mumbai and South Mumbai, and we went to one of the best educational institutions of that time. I studied in a convent school, so our parents took care to see that every girl child in the house is educated, and I think that was great. I'm talking, I was born way back in 1963, so you could have imagined. We got a full-fledged convent education, and I think somewhere along the line, the seed was already being sown, which we may have not realized as very young children. And we went to, again, St. Xavier's College. The entire education for past, say, about 16 to 17 years was with nuns and fathers. And they were superb educators. Believe me, the nuns of yesteryears and the fathers that we came across, they were immaculate. They were honest-ridden. They wore morality on their sleeves. They were absolutely those patriarch, matrons, everything rolled into one, which optimized everything that a character would want to. We looked upon them. They were soft-spoken. They taught us well. Our concepts were very clear. Our girl life education had a lot of morality, values, and you can go on, and you can write a thesis about it. So if you are 10 years with nuns and of course 3 years of kindergarten, so you're spending 13 years, you can imagine what impact it would have. There was a chapel attached to our school. So, you know, we were God-fearing, spiritual, everything. And they were wonderful teachers along with the staff. So our staff was also, most of our teachers were Roman Catholic, Anglo Indians. So they spoke well, they taught well, they were old school teachers, uh, and it was wonderful. So I think somewhere along the line, the concept of a teacher is not what we have now. So every young girl at that time, there were not much occupations open to you professionally. So everybody wanted to become like them. So a teacher in you was somewhere being nurtured, born, and so happened. And when we were in college in Xavier's for the next 7 years, I think we saw real teachers, something which was so different from our school life. Those were well dressed and they were very different. They were out to, make you fly, put wings in you, and they gave us wonderful opportunities. So I think that together with school opened up vistas for us. We did our graduation, we did our post graduation, I did MA twice. So all that education kept on going. By the side, I was already married by the time I had my kid. But somewhere along the line, I think the family and the society that I was living in at that point of time just helped us to make us good educationists. And I think that time also I did not have in mind that I'll become an educator. It's only when I completed at the age of 26 all my education, I started that seed that was already there. It just started taking shape in form of, it got its root, it's got its stems, it got its leaves, it started bearing fruits, and there you are, a full-fledged person who realized that my calling was education. So I think too many people helped me. So it happened organically, but I think the process started very long. And so that was my first journey in education. That was full of education and academic qualification. The second journey was when I shifted to Pune. I'd nearly completed all my academic qualification. And that's where, since I did not have much to do at that point of time, I took as a substitute teacher in Bishop School, one of the leading ICSE school. There I was for a short stint as substitution. And that's where I got a call from the Aga Khan Education Board, and they wanted a principal. At that time, when I went for a couple of interviews with them, they did not even reveal that they were looking out for a principal. I thought it was a kindergarten teacher, but I was willing to start at grassroots level. And it came as a bag of complete surprise when they told me that, we are looking out for a principal, and that's where you've been chosen. It took me at least a week to get over it, that I'm starting my career not as a kindergarten teacher, but as as an educator to take over an institute. But I always wanted to teach. So my one condition to them was that if you even make me a principal or whatever it is, I would want to teach. And that's what I want to do. Till today, I am teaching at various levels, at special school, at the training college. In my school, I go into the classes. So I think it's very important for every educator, whether you are here or there, is to connect with your student and see how they feel. I started that with them, and for 6 years I worked with them before they closed down the school. And that's where the stepping stone of my institution took shape. So that was my third phase in 1996 when I started my kindergarten. Absolutely, with 11 children, we swapped the administrator, educators, we were the team, and we were everything. We were researchers, everything. When you start, it's not going to be a great start. And I still remember the premises we got. We sold off most of what we had to pick up that premises, that little, say, 2,000 square feet premises. But today our institutions have grown from the kindergarten, which was there in 1996, with just 11 children. Today we have about 2-3 kindergartens and a lot of franchisees. And we have inclusion at our kindergarten. That's very, very special about it. Then we started with our Teachers Training Institute in 2001. So the 29th July of 1996 will always be etched in the memory when I took the first step in my new school. You can't imagine the feeling that you get, when you step up into your premises when it is done up. And on every 29th July till date, all our institutions, whichever we found, we open up, or we open our premises to new careers. It's always on 29th of July. So in 29th July 2001 came our Teachers Training Institute because it was the need of the hour. We couldn't find the teachers the way we wanted because we wanted inclusive teachers and we couldn't find. So 29th July 2001 came our Teachers Training Institute. After the Teachers Training Institute, we realized a lot of children into our kindergarten had nowhere to go because they did not have a school to go because they was with special needs or they had some kind of learning challenges. So we had our own early intervention center. All this happened very organically. You did not have a pathway in mind, but I think when God sets your pathway, you start walking on that pathway. And I suppose that's what he had in mind. So the early intervention center came in 2005 on 29 July. After the early intervention center, we started catering to a lot of children in mainstream and special needs, but still they could not find a place in the mainstream school. I mean, either even if they were taken, they still had the special tag. And some of the children just didn't fit into the mainstream school, like intellectual disability, autism wouldn't fit in a big way. So that brought about a special school in 2007, again on 29 July. And the special school, then there was no looking back because we had special school, which was so very different from what we have a model in India. And last, we opened a CBSE school and we've made the school absolutely inclusive. We are the first CBSE school in Pune, which has an early intervention center. We have every classroom is a model inclusive classroom. It has neurodiversified children learning together with mainstream children, with therapies going side by side, shadow teachers in the class, special educators in the class. All our mainstream teachers are special educators. They are trained for inclusion. Our premises are trained. We follow the UDL, Universal Design of Schools and Learning for Inclusion. And besides that, we have 2 courses going on, one in special education. It's a skill development course under the Prime Minister's scheme with Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth. And we have another teachers training course and a whole lot of trainings now happening. So when you say, how did I envisage my journey when I was 26 and now 30 years have passed, certain things happen organically, certain things we felt that no, we had to do it because it was the need for the society, but it was never a commercial venture. None of these institutes came because we felt we need to commercially expand. It came because we wanted to do a bit to the society, which was very close. The team is also like that. The team, if you see, we have more than 120 educators working with us at various levels. Somewhere along the line, 90%, I think, share the same pedagogy and vision. And that's why the institutes are where they are today. So I think it's a pyramid model of the journey that we followed. And today, when I look back, there's so much to do. Every day, I want my business development team to think, what can we give back to the society? So every morning, if I have to tell my BD, I said, don't think first commercial, first think what you can give back, and then tell me the other accounts and statistics and everything like that. So that's how I know my journey.
You know, ma'am, hearing your journey, every moment I felt that you were chosen by God, the God's angel in the form of a human who is here to shape so many lives, to give, you know, value to so many students. And I'm sure everyone is going to agree with me because even today, after, you know, going heaps and beyond in her career, she's so humble. She says, you know, you have to believe in giving back to the society. And this can be the belief only of an angel. So today I'm here, like, you know, for me, she's Angel Masrat Tawawala, God's girl.
Thank you so much.
So your journey is truly an inspiration for all the teachers out there. You know, teachers are the most powerful person. They can change and shape life and do wonders for the children, especially those who require special assistance. You know, you can give them hope. You can give them joy of living.
Very true, because today that noble profession somewhere is waning off. And I want to pass a very powerful message. I know we may never be paid as corporate people are paid. We may never be paid like what Finland teachers are paid. But don't forget, India has a vast population and the demography is so vast. We are still needed the most I feel in our society, there may be artificial intelligence, robotics, and a whole lot of software engineers. But who is making those software engineers? Who are making those robot people who drive innovation? It's a teacher, a grassroots level teacher from 3 years of age to about 30 years of an age, a person may need. And so many people today, my friends tell me, oh, everything is available on a click of a mouse and knowledge is there. I said, yes, knowledge is available. Internet is given you. But where is the skill set? How will you apply that knowledge? That will only come from a teacher. Yeah. Even if you open a internet and take a Google sheet today and say that simple one word has 20 sheets, how is the teacher going to? It's the teacher will concise it in 4 lines, and that's what it is all about. Narrow it down.
Absolutely. There is loads and loads of information, but which information to be taken and how it is to be manipulated, that is what is the trick. And that is where teachers are needed. And howsoever science advances, teachers will always be there.
Right. Perfect.
Right. So going ahead, ma'am, right from the initial phases of Sundarji's journey, you had an inclination that ground reality was very different in education sector. So about the gaps we have in learning theories, and not forget the gap between what we desire and ground reality is different. What were the immediate challenges that made you realize the dismissal state of educational pedagogies in India? And why do educators and educational institutes fear making changes in this learning pedagogies, and they adopt whatever suits them best?
When I look at it, I feel India has a demographic population which is really, really vast. So I want to state some figures that we all know that we are the largest democracy in the world. But what happens is 70% of our population is in the rural India. Another problem with us is our institutions are either owned by the government or they are government aided and then they are private. But do you know something? 40% of our institutions are with the government, educational institutions. Another 40 are government aided. So private is a very small number. And the problem is that still 60% of our people stay in rural India. So the pressure on our education system is very, very vast. And with that ever expanding population, which grows at 1.5%, you can imagine. And today, most of our people are in the age bracket of being in school or in college. So look at the pressure on us. And what are the main challenges that India is facing for the dismissal record in education is quality. Quality is something we are not able to give today because government aided are the majority of institutions come under that. Private is something which we cannot afford. Majority of our people cannot afford. So giving quality education, how do we understand what is quality education? How do we standardize that? NEP, the National Education Policy, is just coming. It's going to take us another couple of years to implement it. And we've not been able to bring in universalization of our boards. We have CBSE, IB, IGSE, state boards. So how do we maintain a standard quality? A child gets in IB school, in CBSE school different, in ICSE school, in government school different, and this. Now, same children are passing out, right? And same children are going to be citizens of India. So where do we draw that line that we have? So quality is always going to differ. When this quality differs, it also differs in higher educational institutions, right from after your boards level to the graduates and, post-graduation. Second challenge, which I feel besides the quality, is the access. Look at the way is our social divide. Do you think everybody gets access to our education? Absolutely not. Today, 12 million children of special needs are out of school. Out of 12 million, only 1% is in school. So you can imagine the mainstream population that do not have access. Again, most of our people in rural India are still, 60% we still live in rural area. And you stay in urban city, we find, oh, everybody is staying. But that's not true. We have so much of infrastructural constraints in our school and a lot of social issues, whether it's caste, it's religion, and that is keeping our girls away from education. That is keeping our children away from education. So access becomes the second challenge, which brings us the dismal the system of education looks very poor. The third is the cost of the good education. The education cost has gone completely haywire when we are talking about college and university. When I come to the lower grade, private education institutions are being unaffordable for masses. I'm talking about the masses. I'm not talking about the percentage that can pay. Now, if this kind of education, a good quality education, does not reach because of the cost, 70% to 80% of our children will not be educated. In spite of our best effort of NEP, a government scheme, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, giving midday meals, but look at what's happening at the grassroots level. So that's another third challenge that we face. The fourth biggest challenge is the diversity of our country. We should be very proud of our diversity, the social, cultural diversity. But with that social, cultural diversity, there is a social, cultural divide, which we as educationists are very worried about. Now, what does this divide do to us? Diversity is excellent, but the divide keeps everybody away from the education system. So it could be an ethnic divide, it could be a tribal divide, it could be a socio-economic divide, it could be strata-wise divide, it could be divide between girls and boys. So that divide is deep-rooted in every layer of our society. Unless we don't change our mindset of this divide and bring in more diversity, we are going to face challenges in education. The more the challenges we have, these challenges will keep on increasing in spite of our best effort, because one place is the number of children that we have to educate, being a very large democratic country. And the next phase is all the four most important pointers of challenges, that is quality, access to education, the cost, and the social cultural divide. So this, in my mind, is the biggest challenge we face. Coming to the next part of your question is pedagogy. Pedagogy is at the heart of teaching learning. You cannot teach and learn unless you have a pedagogy. What is happening today is that pedagogy-wise, we are not willing to innovate. We are not willing to reinvent. By the time the other countries of the world are 20 years ahead, we take our first step. So already we are 20 years. We are not willing to reinvent ourselves at every phase. We may reinvent every 5 years, 10 years. But today, with the kind of digital innovations, artificial intelligence, globalizations, complete transformation of the world, ever-changing world, we need to be millennials. Our teachers need to be, our educators need to be with ever-changing mindset and a hat on ourselves. Ever-changing means the way the rotation of the day takes place, our mindset has to change every day, every minute in the rotation. Are we willing to do that? No, we are stuck. Sometimes we are stuck in the time frame for 10 years or 5 years or 2 years. Oh, I've done it. I'm okay with it. Unless we don't change that kind of a mindset, a fast-pacing mindset, we will not be able to do. Our pedagogies will always be behind. We'll have to reinvent our wheel of teaching, and we will reinvent not the knowledge wheel, but our skill set wheels. It's so very important that our skill sets change. So what we teach our children will be knowledge, but what we will change is the skills along with knowledge and the exploration of it. So pedagogies will have to be transformed drastically, 360 degrees. And unless we don't do that, it's going to be very difficult for us.
Ma'am, you have brought us face to the ground reality today, that given the geographical conditions of the country, yes, it is diverse. There are many types of divide, as you mentioned. The only solution, the road ahead that looks forward is if we don't train our children today in skills, if we don't have skill in India, the future looks, in dark.
So, yes, very much in dark. And another thing is, our pedagogies do not have any place for neurodiversified individuals, whether they are kids or adolescent or adult. Now, if you do not have a place in our school system of neurodiversified, which are more than 12 to 14 million today, how is our education system going to continue? So the most important, I feel, all educators and all school management have to understand the diversity and complexity of the students' needs. The more you understand the diversity and complexity of children's need, your regular classroom will become an asset and not a challenge for our futures. So I think that is what, again, we'll have to look into it. That's it.
Absolutely, ma'am. Very important and very powerful messages ma'am have shared here, that how can we make a change? We all educators, we all schools can take a step ahead and try to fit in each and every child, identify their needs, and make our classrooms more meaningful. Hopefully, ma'am, there are a lot of being steps taken in, and with COVID coming in, there has been an evolution in education. Now everyone is realizing that it is not going to be the way it was. We have to reinvent, and there is no other way. Otherwise, there is no
No other way. Yes.
All right. So going ahead, ma'am, you are leading a renowned group of schools. You started out with a few idealistic ideas, and now, post 25 years later, Sundarji have emerged as a force to reckon with in the academic world. So how do you train or coach your teachers to impart learning theories that are very well suited for the overall growth of your students?
So first of all, like I told you, we have these kind of meetings, focus forum meetings on a very different kind of scales. First, let's identify the challenges in every institutions that you face. Ad hoc trainings, ad hoc professional development will be a piecemeal approach. So what we do is every 6 months or 3 months, we identify the challenges and our students' need, not our needs. It's basically our students' needs. So once we have that kind of a sheet with us and a graph with us, the way we are moving, we have a vision in mind. So once the challenges are identified, a vision goes side by side. And that vision is not for 3 months, 6 months. Our goals do not rest on it. It has to be a long-term vision for 3 to 4 years. After we do that basic exercise and we do a lot of Reiki, we spend a lot of human resource into putting ourselves into this kind of situations. Our surveys are done, parent surveys done, teacher surveys done, student surveys done. The needs of the society at large is done. After that, we take up our upskilling our teachers. Now, it's very easy to say we'll do professional development. But professional development is this is my view, okay? I'm quoting myself, could be entirely wrong. I feel upskilling the teacher for a longer period of time works wonders for an organization. So we know that if one teacher who's in a particular situation is at this level, which is required to come 5 notches higher up, what is that process for her for the next 3 years herself to upskill herself? So we would take baby steps for her. That's how we divide our entire teacher community into small group instructions. So it's not like one size fits all. It's how do I see myself into that group for the next 2-3 years with the same job profile before I move on to a next job profile, which is a better one, which helps her to understand and moves up. And for her, it's a ladder up. So this is how I would look at the entire training module. And that has worked very well for our institutions. People are able to stay. Attrition rate is less because everybody upskills themselves, has a stable footing, and then moves on to the next level, which is upgraded for themselves. And we look into it very minutely. So there is a lot of self-satisfaction for that a particular person and also the organization. With upscaling, we look at a lot of HR initiative. Even if you've done a little well in your profile as we are upscaling, there are a lot of good wishes, HR initiatives that go to the person. It could be tangible, it could be remote, it could be intangible. It could be as simple as giving a movie ticket or a spa thing. So there are a lot of things that go side by side. Also, we also look into, it's not only about training, we also understand that the people who are associated with us remotely or as a part of our organization. So we have 3 circles: immediate, periphery, and then the middle circle. Their challenges, we make it less, because challenges, you also know that what kind of human challenges we are facing post-pandemic and pre-pandemic. We try to see that when a person is in our group or is a part of Sundarji's family, first thing we do is to decrease her real life challenges. It could be a kid's challenges, it could be a husband without job. We try to see that those challenges go less. Once those challenges goes less, all our professional development, upskilling automatically fall into place. Unnecessarily, my one quote wherever I am, I'm taking around, please work smart. Do not do dog's work. Do not stretch yourself in such a way that the rubber band is so stretched that tomorrow you have to sit at home. I want the elasticity to be there in you. So this is how we work. And we try to see when we can give a day off, even if it's not there, because that just regenerates them. So a lot of things happen. So it's not only training of the teachers. Training could be a 4-point, but there should be 4 corners with it. Where what is needed, when it is needed, how it is needed, how life, you can make it very simple for people who work. How can you make it rejuvenating? Then a lot of things will fall into place. This is our model. So I just want to give a message, and I'm sure if you do that, many of us have been very, very successful in it. So just sharing with you how we go about it.
Absolutely, ma'am. You know, the traits that you share here are like the true leader need to possess. A true leader need to know his subordinates well. He need to ensure that their well-being is taken care of. It's not only about, you know, the monetary benefits that you give. You have to dwell in their personal lives. You have to ensure that they are at peace at their home so that they can perform better when they're at home. And yes, when you upskill a person, he feels, you know, a level above. I'm working day and night for years. And if I have not grown in my career, I have not grown professionally, I have not learned a new skill, there is, you know, I don't feel like I have accomplished anything. So very great tips shared by ma'am here, you know, that invest in your teachers, treat them well, upskill them, ensure that you know, have an HR type of model where you take care of your teachers' personal well-being also. So that is something everyone needs to practice here. You know, and definitely, you know, this will reduce the attrition rate. There are many schools which complain. We have a very, very high attrition rate. I think this could be the cause.
Right. Another thing is skills will come. Upgradation comes automatically when your environment itself is pleasant. So, I mean, that coffee meets and all are very important. We only talk about it in the corporate world. And we feel a teacher's 9 to 5 and, you know, finish your 9 periods, 29 periods for a week, and there you are off. But it's not that. If you want to look at teaching as a different kind of profession in the 21st century, and you want to reinvent the wheel, I think we should also take a leaf out of the book from the corporate world. So I think it's very important, you know, to introduce different things that they have out there, like casual dressing, no formal dressing on Saturdays. Let's have more of meets on Zoom. Like, that's it. Because we've learned this platform, instead of them traveling and wasting time and all, it's such a pleasant thing that, you know, at 4 o'clock you meet on Zoom, you have your meeting, it's done, and everybody's free. So I think going forward, you could use a lot of technology in your meetings, in your virtual, you can have a blended program, plus a lot of HR initiatives which are there in the corporate world. I think, and then the respect that people will have for the teachers, and they won't look like those drudgery people who are dead tired by the end, a student who has troubled them and, you know, they've taken a life out of them. Another thing is, most of our trainings have to include neurodiversified trainings. This is what I've been training thousands of people across the globe. And I want to tell you, ma'am, that none of our teachers, most of them, not none, sorry, most of the teachers do not know that a classroom has neurodiversified individuals. And because they don't know how to get across to those neurodiversified individuals, which are about 18-19% today, they are at a loss. So I think our teachers do not have education about them. Neither does our B.Ed course. I've just 2 chapters about neurodiversified. So a training at that level, because B.Ed is the D course for it, has to completely change and completely undergo drastic 360 degrees change. And so that we can include these kind of things, which will be needed for a 21st century teachers. We still are giving lessons in our B.Ed, which are chalk and talk. We need to incorporate artificial intelligence. We need to do all that in our lesson and in our new curriculum. So I think then our teachers would get ready for the 21st century automatically.
Absolutely, ma'am. As they keep on working, they keep on learning, and with mentors like you, definitely there is a growth curve rising higher for them. You know, ma'am, I was just a few days back, I came across a wonderful Telugu movie. I don't recall the name. It said that a teacher needs to have 64 skills. I don't know from where they came with that figure, but you know, a wonderful thing where they said a teacher is a artist, she's a storyteller, she's a mother, she's a nurse. What all? I mean, how can one expect so much from a teacher? But that is true. You know, a teacher has so many facets. She have to upskill in each one of them. Then, you know, then she becomes that ideal teacher. You know, so it's definitely a huge role. But as you said, when you're passionate about it, you go beyond all your, you know, weaknesses and just do the magic that is needed.
Right.
So
very true.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
In fact, I would want to send a very powerful message to our education ministry that you need to make our teacher training course, that is the B.Ed or D.Ed or whatever it is, the most ultimate course. Today, I think if that becomes, it is a 2 years course, 1 year. Now it's 2 years. If that becomes like a 4 years graduate course, which they are thinking in NEP, and you elevate the state of a teacher like the Finland has, they're the most sought out of the people. In Finland, how is it that a teacher is one of the most sought out profession? They're the most highly paid profession. Even doctors don't get. I think once you start thinking in those lines, I know it will take another 20 years, 30 years, but I think our next 10 generations will profit from it. Unless we don't do that, I don't think we will get that status of this 64 roles. The moment you do that, we will get it.
Absolutely, ma'am. Completely agree with you. I think this is a very thoughtful solution to this problem that teaching quality is not good. You make the course a highly acclaimed one. Yes, that is something a very powerful message definitely here for our education ministry. Let's see. Let's hope for the changes. Now we are seeing a lot of things coming in.
Yes, and then only those who really want to teach will go for that course, right? So we will have designated, passionate teacher, not somebody who doesn't have much to do. So 1 year, I'll just do this course because the other courses are 5 years. So I think once we're talking about so many overalls for education system. I think one of them will also be this in near future, according to the NEP.
Yeah, they are in talks, making this course a bit and adding some more additional courses also for the existing teachers.
Right.
There's a lot of things going on in there. Hopefully, let's see, hopefully the generation see better.
I'm sure the way the government is going, I'm sure that they will look into it because NEP is BJP's government, very good agenda. And I'm sure we will hit it with it.
Absolutely. So going ahead, ma'am, you were recently awarded as the best woman contributor in special education for children with special needs, IIWA Awards from GISR Foundation Award, India and Women of Excellence Award, Indian Achievers Forum, India. So, ma'am, I want our viewers to know more about your achievements in the field of special education and what it means to you.
So, special education is a passion and it's very close to my heart. All of us have one passion in life, huh? And for me, it's the children with special needs. And I've seen them very closely from the day I started the Early Intervention Center. But I want people to understand that just having passion for special need just doesn't work. We'll have to work for it because we have so many millions of children in India and across the globe with special need. So first of all, I want to tell you that let us identify children with special need at a very early age. That's the key to it. So now we've got those kind of tests and our Indian standards are very good in identifying and diagnosing children with special needs. We are foremost in that. So by 18 months to 6 years, we can identify children with multiple needs. It could be learning challenges like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia. It could be autism, which can be caught at the age of between 18 months to 3 years. It could be intellectual disability. It could be any kind of syndrome. The key is to identify these kids. The earlier, the better, because the brain is at that time just forming. 98% of the brain develops till 6 years or 8 years. And when you're born, it is just 25%. So you have a huge 5 to 6 years to overcome all your challenges. You can overcome them. Certain of these disabilities are neurobiological. So you may just be able to overcome, you cannot eradicate it. But it's good enough, because if you get the right stimulation, the right kind of environment, the right richness in your activities, it's easy for a parent, for a child to overcome, and that the parent is there to support it. After the early intervention phase of a child with special needs, it is very, very important to identify the children, where will it fit in. So again, one size fit all doesn't happen. So that's the crucial stage between 6 to 8 years, to understand whether the child will need mainstream school, whether the child will need a resource center in a mainstream school, whether the child will need in mainstream a shadow teacher, or in a mainstream school he'll be able to function with his class teacher with little help here and there, or will he need special school, or will he need a resource center, or will he need home tutoring, or will he need a designated place for himself? Because there are certain disabilities which does not fit in any of these setup. Then you will need a designated facilities for him. So once this ground reality and groundwork is done, then you look at how to promote these special children from early phase to a puberty phase, to adolescent phase, to adulthood phase. Now that process is long, it's tough, but it's something that is achievable if the right things happen at the right time. So I feel the key to helping special children is at various phases. If you have done a fantastic early intervention program, there is every hope that the child will be able to function in a given society with basic help. And that's what we need today. If you put a child in special needs school, you need to see that what kind of academics can you give. So again, there will be level of academics, whether you can see that this child goes to the 10th standard NIOS till 12th standard, or after a certain number of years of functional academics, he will be able to do only vocational, which is very good. If you teach a special kid a vocation, put him for 4 to 5 years of vocation, there is a lot of scope for him standing on his own feet. Along with it, a lot of life skills have to be done, like his ADL skills. How will we take care of? How will we be financially independent? What is the future legal planning? So all these kind of things will keep on coming as he goes on from 6 years to 18 years. By the time a child is 16 years, and if he's managed to do his academic and finish his NIOS, there is a lot of hope. Even if he's not been able to do his academics, his vocational skill will be sharpened, because you're putting him through a program of vocational skills. Once a special need child is 18 and above, you have to look out for a industry-based vocation for him. So now we have a lot of corporates, we have a lot of facilities, not as well as abroad, but people are warming up to neurodiversified individuals to be in their job opportunities, to be in their place of work. So a lot of corporates employ them. There are a lot of professions open to them, which will help these children with special needs to take their life on to the next level. So we have identified areas for children from 3 years to 21 years, how they would go. So there is a roadmap for them. We try to discuss that roadmap when a parent comes with us, not with surety, but we definitely tell them that this is what we look at in future. Of course, your long-term, short-term goals will keep on changing, but let's get a blueprint of what is in store for him. Once that blueprint is maintained, and with challenges, ups and downs, spurts will all be a part of it. But I think more or less, at least we are very sure that after 10, 15 years, we are going to help the child in this way. So special needs is not something which we can get up overnight and one day wake up and say, okay, I can do it. It requires a lot of resources. It requires a thorough, not study of the subject, but how will you manage the entire situation for every child. It requires long-term planning. It requires dedicated team. It requires financial assistance. It requires industries to support us, corporate to support us, government to support us. We require inclusion at every step. We require teachers to be inclusive with that inclusive knowledge. Every garden, every theater, everywhere we will need inclusion. So it's a long-term plan. And I think we, as somewhere along the line, as an educator, have understood it because I've been more than 20 years into it. It became a passion. And now every step we look at it. Now, if this child is going to leave us at 18 years, can I provide him assisted living solution? Because parents will never be there always. Can I think of an ashram for him? Not the ashram that you and I think of, but they are community assisted living communities where we have special children living together with one caretaker and the parents take in turns. A lot of models are in front of us. Model A, model B, model C. We keep on reinventing all our models. We keep on understanding what models are there abroad. We keep on connecting with people who are in Delhi, Punjab, in Australia, Vancouver, everywhere to understand the nitty-gritty of different challenges, models, whatever we do, and come to a conclusion, what can we bring back to India in the best possible way, keeping in mind our challenges, Indian challenges, where we are not supported by the government, where everywhere else they are really supported by the government. So keeping in mind all those challenges, what can we do for these children? And that's how we are partnering with people across, collaborating. In fact, we have one of the corporates, Credit Suisse, we did a very big awareness for them. And they are employing people with neurodiversity. And we are looking at making workplace accommodations, the canteen accommodations, or how should be their work table be when our children will grow up and go out into the real world. So now the key will be when they will grow up, what can we do for them? As babies, we can do lots. Till 16 years, everything we can do. But the challenge for us, for me today, is a roadmap after 16 to 24 for them. That's
absolutely. You know, it's like, it's not only about educating them academically in the initial years. It's about what after they,
yes.
graduate. What after that? What is the road ahead? That is truly, a question to be, discussed about. That what is the road ahead for these children, and the way you are going ahead with the collaborations and all, this is what is needed. It's needed. It is needed today, and for all the parents out there, my dear parents, the moment we conceive our children, we start painting the picture. Oh, my child will be this, my child will be that. Every one of us, each one of us are like that. But the day we get the harsh reality that there is some defect, or I'll not call it defect, or there is some special need there,
some kind of neuro challenges,
yet all your dreams are shattered, and it takes time to assemble yourself and stand. So parents, but you are chosen, you are the chosen ones. Taking care of a child with special needs, it's not easy. You are the chosen one. So the best thing that you can do is accept this reality and do the early intervention thing at the earliest. As ma'am said, approach the centers which can help you at an early stage. That is the best thing that you can do for your child. So, this message was very beautifully explained by ma'am, that how this road is ahead.
Yeah. And we'll also have to understand that today as a parent, we'll have to start planning for all our neurodiversified children, adolescents, a roadmap, legal planning and financial planning, because you and I will never be there forever. So how do we secure the future of our children? We cannot put them into homes. Definitely, that's not going to be the way out. So how do we take care of them? So financial planning is very important. I've seen families suffering because there was no vision, no thinking, no futuristic thinking. But now when a parent comes to us, that's after 2-3 years, we start, even if the child from 9 years onwards, we look at what is his future going to be at 19. So at 9, we have to start, because that gives us 10 years, ahead of time. That this is what we are looking for. So for special needs children, I also want to pass on a message that what you do at 9 will hold true at 19. And what you do at 19 will hold true at 29. So it's not like the other kids. So be very careful as a parent, as an educator, that every step for a special needs children is not one step forward, but it's 20 steps forward. You may be taking one, for them it is 20 steps. So just don't play around with their lives. Just don't go about teaching anyhow. Just don't integrate or include them just because you have to, and there is a court order or the government order, and leave them into the classroom to do nothing, just the art and craft music, because no stimulation to the brain, no intervention to the brain, no cognitive development, and no intervention, no neural plasticity, no neurons connecting with each other. They regress 10 years backwards. So what if they have done at 9, they'll go back to say 3 years old if you've not done a good job. So that's where we are very worried about, when, you know, a lot of lives of the children are played up with in different ways.
This is definitely a burning topic, you know, even if the government has ordered, all right, inclusion is mandatory, and now you have to take children in mainstream school. Are the teachers trained? Are they patient enough? Are the children around being taught how to treat that child who is 20 steps behind you? You know, these thoughts actually, you know, I get goosebumps thinking about what will happen to these children. You know, what is the road that we are planning ahead? I don't know. Government or school educators need to give it a thought. It's very much needed.
Inclusion will have to be there. It's going to be a reality which is going to be thrust upon you. You don't have an option. You know, you may admit a child at their nursery stage at 3 years without knowing that he's neurodiversified kid. And tomorrow after 3 years, you'll come to know. You cannot remove him in school, right? Unless a parent do it, because you're not up to the mark. And there are about 18% kids in every class, which will be neurodiversified. So you'll have to do. So instead of crying and, you know, making you and cry about it, I think we just have to understand that we have to get ourselves equipped with it. So being our 25th year, we have sent out feelers to thousands of schools and across India and elsewhere that we want to help you in the process of inclusion. Right from grassroots level, we are willing to help you for the next 3 years. And we are not even going to charge you for it, as long as you do the inclusion process. That's all we want you to do. We support you with the training. We will support you with a lot of information. We'll train your teachers, the kids. We will monitor you over next 3 years. But with hands folded, please do inclusion. That is what. And there's no other way out.
To all the educators, to all the school leaders out there, please go ahead and connect with ma'am and, you know, get this training done. This is something which is very much needed, because inclusion is bound to happen. You cannot go away with it. That's true. So going ahead, ma'am, on this wonderful note of inclusion and giving equal opportunities to everyone, we reach to the very interesting segment of the show, which is called Rapid Fire Round. Here you need to answer only in one word, max a sentence. All right. So here goes the first question. Name your favorite food or cuisine.
Chinese.
Chinese. Yoga or calisthenics?
Yoga. Fan of it.
Children are dash.
Innovative.
Gardening is an escape to trivial word. True or false?
True. No, not at all. Gardening is a passion.
All right, it's a passion. Now, the last question. What is your leisure time activity?
My leisure time activity would be just watching something which is comedy, or reading a book which is light-hearted, not a very heavy book. That really keeps me de-stressed.
So now you tell me, you know, the woman who is herself, so, you know, the fountainhead of ideas, who is so visionary, who is so humble. Whom does this lady look out for inspiration? Who is your source of inspiration?
So I want to name a few. It could not be one, because the journey is pretty long. I have my mentors, the three Sundarji sisters, from where we got their name. They've always been teachers at various levels. They are wonderful teachers, and I look upon them as my godmothers, from where I learned a value system of life. I learned things that I should carry up my sleeve all the time without tweaking on it. I also have, in the kindergarten circle, I have Dr. Swati Popat-Vats. I have my entire family is full of educators. So I have those people as mentors, Farzana Dahodwala. But there are certain people whom you read about and you get inspired. One is Anne Sullivan, who was a teacher of Helen Keller. And if you know the story, she's the one who taught Helen. She taught her 600 words, and each one with a concept and to visualize it. And she gave her the wings to fly. She got her graduated. So if you actually read the story of Anne, you will realize what an inspiring teacher she was. There are so many inspiring teachers. When you read, you really want to do more and more. Recent times, it is Nelson Mandela. Then there's Erin Gruwell, who I've read about a lot. She's an American teacher. She was not a very dynamic teacher, but she was a teacher which touched the hardcore of every child. She made every child write a journal and made a movie on themselves. And that's how she dealt with thousands of children. And that's how she brought a lot of teaching into them. Closer home, there are many, many people whom I think we admire now is Mr. from Bihar, the Super 30 teacher who teaches Anand Kumar, who inspires children at that level to give GE exam, which is impossible. Can you imagine the kids from the underprivileged background giving GE exams? He teaching them, and have the opportunity to, meet him once. And he's a super, super teacher, unassuming, not knowing any, the ground reality, just keeps on and on and on. I think India has produced some of the great contributors to that list. It could be a teacher under the bridge. There are many teachers who are running schools under the bridge. Some are running on the cycle. Those are people who inspire us and say that we are sitting in our plush offices and we have so many things chalked out for ourselves. But there are teachers like that. And each one's story, each one's life history is truly, truly inspiring. So before I just sleep, I somewhere or the other, I read about these. And, when you get up next day, it motivates you to do a little more, to go that extra bit. That difference between ordinary and extraordinary is only that little extra. And I think whoever you want to read, whether it's Elon Musk or whether it's these teachers are Indian or across the globe, I think you should always sleep with an inspiring person's quote, or it could be Sadhguru, and that just motivates you to become better and better in life. So if you ask me who's the one most contributing, I'm sorry, I couldn't name that, but there are so many people. Today it could be this one and tomorrow it could be this one, as long as they keep on inspiring you. That's it.
Absolutely, ma'am. Hearing you, I can realize, that even teachers, they actually awakens us. We think that we can be this, but they tell us that you are thinking this, but you can be a lot more. There is so much potential. So they are the one who make us realize our own potentials and capabilities. So, my last viewer's choice question was there, which was on early intervention, but ma'am has already taken up, because I think she understands, being in this field for so many years, she understands the importance of early intervention. So here we would close the session because the question has already been taken up. So, ma'am, you are one of those educators who has taken a bold step towards an integrated schooling format that embraces children from all walks of life. Talking to you, I realize, that such kind of people also exist. Is it really? Are you real there? Or I don't know. I mean,
no, we are there. I would love to come and visit our school. All the children are like bouquets of flowers. They are so diversified. I have one with Tourette syndrome. I have one with Rett. I have one with Angelman syndrome. He keeps on laughing. Angelman is all about that you laugh all the time. So, and then I have a dyslexic. I have high functioning autistic children, Asperger's. I have intellectual disability. I have cerebral palsy. So I have Cornelia de Lange, which is 1 in a million. I still remember that child came to me like a monkey walking with facial hair. Cornelia de Lange is all about it. You have facial hair like a monkey. Your gait is like a primate monkey. And today she's 19 years old. She can stand straight. She can walk, and she passed out of she gave her 10th standard. She couldn't read, but somebody could read for her. And she could write. She couldn't, give a very clear speech. So I have seen so many different kind of cases with different kind of combination with skill sets, different skill sets and different challenges in children. that I wonder that when I really hang up my boots, I can write a thesis on each one of them. And seeing them from 3 years till 18 years is like, you can't imagine how emotional I'll get. And seeing them pass out and then become something. And then on Facebook, they'll send you a hi or they'll write something. They've all started using Facebook and all. You feel, yeah, these are the kids who walked into our premises and they were like with so many challenges. And I'm not saying they have reached this, but in their own way, they have climbed the ladder of success. Each one's ladder of success is very different. So many success stories across for all of us.
Absolutely, ma'am. So, to my viewers, you are aware that teaching is tough, but do you know teaching a child with special need is tougher? And the joy that ma'am is getting, seeing that she has created a difference. This is a joy that can be felt by a special educator, because there are highs and lows. There are days when you think, oh, today I was not able to do anything. I was not able to create a difference. It's a very, very patient journey. You have to be highly patient for them, to see that sun rays behind these children, that halo behind them. So
yes.
One such person who can see that halo, that one day it will come up. So ma'am, I highly respect your efforts, your endeavors in training teachers to be competitive and creating this environment of inclusion. This is what is going to make a society a better place. This is what is going to teach our children who do not have any special needs, but they understand it's okay to be different. They understand to respect each other more. And that is what is the truly required from our teachers also, from our children also today. They should understand there are challenges in life. There are many more challenges of your own body which are much more than what you think you have. So it was such an insightful session with you. There were so many learnings, ma'am. I feel blessed, and we at Great Principles are feel privileged to have a chance to interact with you, and we appreciate your time with us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Just a parting comment. I owe this success to my team. It's a big team. To my mentors, the Sundarji sister, and a message once more. If you want to be inclusive, we will always be there for you to help you out. To one and all, whoever's going to listen to us, please be feel to connect with us at Sundarji's Global Academia, and our team will be ready to see that we form an inclusive society together. That's it. Good evening. Thank you so much, Great Principal. It was a pleasure talking to you. And it was more of a pleasure because we are going to reach out to so many people who will profit by it. Thank you. Thank you.